Hello again, it's been a while. I just hit over 1,000 subscribers, so I thought, why not lose them all by talking about some books I read about feminism and things like that. So, quick disclaimer, we're going to talk about some very delicate subjects, from rape to abortion, so just be aware. So, I've been wanting to talk about this kind of thing for a while, about how feminism and intersectional feminism seems to have become a bit of a dirty word, and 3 books that I read recently solidified my thoughts on doing that. Rather than doing full-on book reviews, I'm going to sort of dip in and mention bits and discuss more what they meant to me and how I think about it, and it's going to be my thoughts. It's not going to be a super smart video essay or anything like that. So the first one was Down Girl by Kate Manne. It's more academic than the other 2 and it's very interesting, but a bit rigid, I feel. It dismisses Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl outright as misogynistic, rather than considering the fact that if we had more good female roles, we wouldn't need the specific ones that we see to represent the every woman. So with more representation, we'd be free to have, so-called bad characters. And the next book was Not That Bad, Dispatches from Rape Culture, edited by Roxane Gay, and Nasty, Volume 2, edited by Tiffany Scandal, and those 2 are anthologies of essays. Some of what I'm going to say is probably going to come off a bit obvious or even naive perhaps, but I kind of feel that it doesn't do any harm to keep talking about things, because someone out there may not have thought of something that seems quite obvious to other people, so why not? And to begin with, I'll just talk about what feminism means to me. And to me, it's not about the people who just say men are trash. It is about equality. Currently, the way that we treat gender isn't good for anyone. For example, suicide rates among young men are very high. They're less likely to report abuse, and it's because showing your feelings, crying, is seen as a weakness. You get called a cuck or a beta, or So really things have got to change for everybody, and it's about remembering the importance of every single person, from trans, people of colour, disabled people, and everybody. I know that there's a tendency to get frustrated online when someone says, oh, but what about this group of people that you've forgotten about, or how about these people? But I think in that situation, if you get called out, as they say, the best thing to do is take a step back. Don't react immediately. Have a think. Is it something that you feel is, a worthwhile criticism? And be very honest about that. And apologise, and try and do better, because we've got to start somewhere, and we can't improve the future if we just keep fighting for the status quo. And we're not going to improve as a society if we continue to leave people out. So many of them resonated with me personally, and were actually a relief to read. For example, Kobayashi Married for Queers by Lydia Zithali, in the Nasty book, was talking about sexuality being confusing, and for a long time she didn't want labels because it took her so long to understand it, and she still didn't know if she did. And I completely relate to that. I was very much the same at 15. I was very confused, and I remember sort of trying to talk about it and most people not really wanting to hear, and actually it wasn't until a drama group came to our school, like Legs Akimbo with League of Gentlemen, that sort of thing. But that actually really helped me, because I went to speak to the woman afterwards and said that I felt like, my fiance's doing a massive great in the background. And I realised that I didn't have to have everything figured out immediately. And to be honest, I still don't. There's pansexual, there's bisexual. Which one am I? I don't know. Who cares? But it was a huge kind of weight off my shoulders to see other people feeling the same thing. And when you talk to people about it, there are so many that kind of see you as a fetish object or joke about you being oversexed or something like that. And you know, I've had many experiences of telling people that I was kind of bi, I think, and men in particular kind of taking to it really creepily. The essays are varied and from many perspectives, which is vital, and I found it really useful to read outside of my own experience. For example, there was Palace of Bones and Champagne by Autumn Christian, #Turf Cult by Larissa Glasser in Nasty, those two are, Picture Perfect by Cherise Tracy, and Roxane Gay's own story. But there's instances of something recognisable in all of them, even if it seems completely far out of my experience range. Reading these and having listened to women, trans women, women of colour online and, you know, wherever, it seems really obvious that people are frustrated. But I have seen many online, often men, not always, but often men, side with whoever seems calm and reasonable, and complaining that the people with complaints are too emotional or irrational, without pausing to think that there may be a reason that this person is angry and perhaps they've been carrying something around with them for a long time. Cherise Tracy's essay Picture Perfect in Not That Bad talks of the pressure to forgive her father and act as if nothing happened, so as not to shatter the illusion of the perfect black family to outsiders, which is heartbreaking, and it causes her to explode with emotion at one point, which is inevitable. And I'm angry for her and for anyone in that situation. I'm angry about things that happened to me, from a sexual assault many times by one of my boyfriends to sexual harassment at work. There was a guy who loved himself at me on a train. There was a man who grabbed my backside at the swimming pool when I was about 14. And those are just a few. And with the sexual harassment, when I finally exploded at work, I threatened to quit, actually. I was reassured, don't worry, come back. But after that, people avoided talking to me. They kind of looked at me sideways for a long time as if I was hysterical. In their minds, it was all just a laugh. We were all having a joke, and suddenly I overreacted. That's not what happened from my perspective. And there's a really good quote, which I've got in my notes here, from the essay All the Angry Women by Liz Lenz in Not That Bad. A few weeks after my family stopped talking to me, my parents celebrated Christmas with the man who abused my sister. In the NFL, men who are accused of rape and domestic violence soon make their way back to the field, if they are ever required to leave. But angry women are never allowed to be anything more than shrill cries from the sidelines. So yeah, we're going to get onto the nasty bit, which is rape culture. And don't leave, just hear me out. So, okay, the book Not That Bad, Dispatches from Rape Culture is called that because it is what we tend to say after it's happened to us, not just women. You know, whoever's had, you know, something like this happen to them, we say, oh, it's not that bad compared to what this person went through or that person went through. And also people say it to us. When I had that experience with my then boyfriend at a festival, when I was about 20, I think, I was very confused. I didn't really understand why I was so afraid afterwards, and I told a friend of mine, and she actually said, oh, I don't think that's anything, like I don't think it's that bad. And just the fact of listing out everything that's happened just to me, who's quite a privileged white lady, I think it sounds unbelievable. And, you know, I wonder if I say to someone the list of things, if they'll just think I'm lying. So that's interesting. Now, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that every single person with a story is telling the truth. I do think there's a small percentage that isn't, but many are. And Occam's razor suggests that if so many people are saying the same thing, with several stories to one person, then much like racism, the situation is systemic and endemic. Like Lisa Cantorell says in her Nasty essay, Never Cursed, rape is not a straight line. Consent can be given and taken away. It is circumstantial, moment to moment. Each time someone uses your body without consent, they steal a bit of your personhood. It erodes. You wonder who you really are. It marks you in a way predators can see. And when I think about the exes that I've had, that makes a lot of sense to me. Down Girl discusses society's tendency to sympathise with the offender, see them as someone who was confused, maybe got drunk, was generally affected by outside sources, such as Brock Turner and Daniel Holtzclaw, rather than accept the duplicitousness of such people. The book opens with the sentence, "Women who are strangled rarely cooperate with the police." And then it goes on to list the ways in which it's more dangerous than it first seems. For example, there's oxygen deprivation, and the next stage of violence after strangulation is often murder. I took a breath in when I read that, because, again, like I say with my exes, I have an ex who tried to strangle me. He held me up against the wall, my feet were off the ground, he was looking right into my eyes with a kind of really like, oh, he loved what he was doing, he really did. He'd been wanting to do it for ages. And I fell to the floor, he scarpered, and there was a small group of people who ran over to see if I was okay. And they took me to a police car, and I started to tell the policeman what happened in the car. And then he said, "So you want to press charges?" And I said no, because I'd had a few drinks before that. My brain told me that it was my fault and I was embarrassed and I just wanted to leave. And then I went to the hospital the day after because I still felt terrible. And he was standing right next to me the entire time. So when the doctor said, "Oh, was this a drunk thing?" I kind of pretended to laugh and said, "Oh yeah." And he looked at me like I was a bucket of crap. And he only went with me to the hospital because basically he'd been like grinding me down the day after about how this entire thing was my fault, and I think it was just word salad because I can't remember anything he said. But he ended up going with me and being really worried and going, "Oh my God." Once I told him and made it very clear that I did actually remember what had happened the night before. So I think he wanted to go with me to make me avoid telling other people about it and being around my friends and so on. The author of the book goes on to say that it's often shrouded in silence, and it was. I don't think I really told anyone that I was strangled until much later. And it was a shock to think of it as an act of misogyny and dominance, because at the time I just saw it as rage, someone sick of somebody, and the fact that the people around me at the time kind of dismissed it and I downplayed it myself. And I didn't really understand for a long time why my anxiety became so much worse after that, and I was actually annoyed with myself at how I was affected. And Kate then goes on to mention a lady called Rosetta Watson, who was black and disabled. She was evicted for calling up twice in one day about being strangled. She was evicted because she was seen as causing trouble. Kate tries to understand and define misogyny. She reminds us that it's not just a person who consciously hates women, but rather a systemic issue with biases in the perpetrators that they may not realise they had themselves. And they'd be surprised and horrified if someone pointed it out to them. It also goes a little way to explain why abortion has become such a political issue. It taps into fears of promiscuity and lack of control. I have been through one myself, and unless you were there with me, you don't know what I went through or how I felt. But that's as much as I'm going to say on that. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, of course, but when misinformation is spread by groups like March for Life and hateful comments attack those who've been through it online, it's dangerous. It feels like they're yelling into my soul. Melissa Morales's nasty essay, My Famous Abortion, and Amanda Palmer actually opening up on Twitter about hers were really reassuring to me, because the discourse surrounding the subject, in America at least, and not just in America, but it's kind of reaching fever pitch, and it's scary. This thread of anger runs strongly in all three books, but it's not helpless anger. It's the kind of anger that fights and gets things done. It's so much easier for everyone to connect now and learn about each other and try to understand each other, and the old order is crumbling, and a lot of the fear and pushback is from that. Jessa Jordan's essay in Nasty going viral, if you'll forgive the cheesiness, felt like a battle cry. One of the last lines in it is, we are powerful and no longer can they flex and beat us into submission. And I'm going to take that away with me, and hopefully you can take away everything I've spoken about today with you. So yeah, those are some thoughts. Enjoy your day. Thanks.